Well, we're going to try something a little different today. Different camera. Grab a cup of coffee. Let's have a coffee and a chat for a minute, shall we? I want to tell you, share some stories, testimonies with you of some things that have happened before. And I need something. Hang on. All right. Yep. Because I'm going to show you what I was talking about. And I don't know how good this is going to work on camera. But anyway, Marv and I were just talking. And like I said, I've probably, a couple of years ago shared these stories I'm going to tell you. I may have already shared them on here. But that's okay. I'm going to do it again. And yeah, hopefully I'll remember enough, because I'm finding every year I just can't remember quite as much as I used to. But anyway, so Marvin and I were talking about this and how amazing God is. He does not have limits. He can do absolutely anything out of absolutely nothing. That's where everything around you came from. Do you realize that? That there was nothing. There was no time. There was no space. There was no matter. There was nothing. And then God spoke it into existence until he got to us. With man, he actually took the dirt in his hands and formed the man. He took the rib from his side and formed the woman, and he breathed the breath of life into us. So he took a little extra special care with us. Everything else, he said, let there be, and it was. So, is God any different today? No. Oh, just for anybody that cares, I'm drinking iced coffee today because we've been in the 90s, and we're going to be there again today, and then temperatures are going to drop 20 or more degrees. So here we are, and you're probably going to hear some noise in the background. People. The guys I don't know what they're doing, but I hear them hollering for each other every so often. But anyway, that's okay. We're going to get through this. So, Marvin and I were talking, and we actually were talking about how expensive cable TV is, and and how crazy things are, and how all of that ever began, and we were reflecting on some things, and anyway, and it brought me back to a memory, and then when we started talking about it, then stuff started stirring, because we serve an awesome God. So back when I had gone through my divorce, I had a roommate for a while, and then after, I don't know, she'd lived with me for several months. I'm not sure. I want to say she'd probably been living with me for close to 6 months. But anyway, I had to be out of town for the weekend with my parents for a business thing. And while I was gone, she and her friends cleaned me up. They robbed me. So I came home because I used to keep cash in my house, and learned some lessons on that. And she knew where things were. I had never felt I needed to hide any of that from her. I trusted her, but it turned out that wasn't a good thing to do. So she and her friends, they robbed me, took any jewelry I had of value, and I did have some. I had my wedding rings from both of my grandmothers, or their wedding ring sets. And I had plans for those. I was going to make a display with, because like my one grandmother, I had this gorgeous picture of when she and Grandpa got married, a wedding photo. And my other grandma and Grandpa, they didn't have a fancy wedding or anything. They had to borrow the dollar to pay the preacher. But I had other things from them, and so I was going to do these shadow boxes, and neither of the sets still had the diamonds in them. those had been taken by other family members and made into other jewelry, but I had the actual rings. And so I thought, I'll just have cut glass, put into them, and I'll make these shadow boxes, and those will be so cool. And when I had gotten the rings, I had showed them to her, so she knew I had those. I still had my rings from, even though I was divorced, I was trying to figure out what to do with my rings, so they were in there. And some other jewelry that I had that actually had value, and they took all that. So they cleaned me out. Now, when that happened, I still was going to let her stay until she found someplace to go, because I didn't want to just put her out on the street. But I had some other family members step in and say, And so they came and told her she had to go, like, now, this minute. And so, and she didn't argue about it, because she didn't want, the police had been called, and they already knew who she was. She had a prior history. And so they basically, since a lot of what was taken was cash, and you can't, trace that, or my homeowner's insurance wouldn't cover it or anything. So basically the police officer, my parents were with me, and when this happened, they were devastated, because they really loved this gal too, and it just couldn't believe she did this. And so, and she was, because she and her friends had taken my money, they'd hawked the jewelry, I suppose, or, whatever. And then they had gone on a shopping spree at the mall, and documented it on Facebook. Some of it, they were actually wearing some of the jewelry that they had taken from me. So anyway, there was no question as to who did it or what happened, but she was not there when I got home. She had gone, and I knew she would be out of town. I had some little dogs, and I was trying to get back so they wouldn't be alone, for very long after she left. And so I was trying to time everything out, and so she wasn't there. And I did call her and talk to her, and she did come home that same day. But anyway, the police basically just told me I was an idiot, to have somebody like her living in my house. And of course, this is what was going to happen. And there was no sympathy, no caring or anything. But anyway, so I was like, when she got there, she goes, well, I know you're going to want me to leave now. And I was like, you can stay till you find someplace to go, because I didn't want to put her out on the street. But then, like I said, I had family members that showed up and said, that's not how it's going to be. And they took over and told her, you're leaving now. So she was like, okay. So she packed an overnight bag, and one of my kids, I think, had even, went with her. Well, she packed it to make sure she wasn't taking anything she shouldn't. And so, and then she left. And I had already changed the locks that day, because my parents insisted I do that, because they're like, we don't know about these other people. Do they have a key? Did she make a key for them? And, we want you to be safe, because you're going to be here alone, especially we want you safe. So I had a locksmith come out and change the keys, so her keys wouldn't get her in or anything. And so I told her, she goes, she made some calls, and she goes, I got a place I can stay, but I can't get my stuff till Saturday. And I don't, I think, which was like in a week. And so I said, it's okay. I'll pack your stuff up for you, and I'll have it all ready for you to go. So all you gotta do is come pick it up. So she goes, okay. Well, it was a good thing I did that, because as I was packing her boxes, I found all kinds of other things that had mysteriously disappeared out of the house and into her stuff in her room. So she had a problem, all right? She had a record, she had a history. So anyway, she moved out, and, and everything. Well, I no longer had the income from her living there, but that wasn't really that big of a deal, because I basically, she just paid her share of the expenses. I didn't really charge her rent. In fact, what she did pay didn't often cover all her expenses anyway. So, but she had she had got her own cable, and I ended up having to pay for that, because I was the homeowner, and she ran out on the bill. And so there ended up being some things. But all my money was gone. Whatever things of value that I had left after the divorce, because basically my ex-husband had also gone through the house and taken everything that he felt was of value that he could sell and get money for when he left. So I really had nothing, and and I wasn't too sure what I was going to do, but I didn't get upset. Okay, one of the rare times in life when I didn't panic or get upset, and so I'm just like, okay, so I told God, I know you can take care of me. You're my husband, you're my provider, you're my father, you're my everything, my best friend. You're my God, my King, my Lord, and whatever I need, I know that you will take care of it for me. So I don't know what I'm going to do, because I'm not going to have any, my next check of money to come in isn't for a while yet. I have no resources, but I know you're going to take care of me, because you always have. So I just really was at peace about it. And I used to have a little Bible study that met in my house. And so it was in like Tuesday nights or something. So that morning I was, dusting and getting everything ready, because people would be coming into the house that night. And so here's one of the things I remember. There were more things that happened with this, but this is the one I remember the most. So I've showed you guys this before, some of you that have been with me for a long time. This is my treasure box. And in this treasure box, I have scriptures. I always have some on top that I'm reading all the time. And then they're, on 3x5 cards. And these are scriptures that, have meant a lot to me over the years, or sometimes there's some cards that are just words of encouragement that I've received from people or whatever. But this is my treasure box that everything in here means something deep to me concerning my relationship with Christ. Like, okay, so like I have 3 cards that I'm keeping on top now, because I'm reading these every day, because they have been really speaking to me. But just taking the top one is, the end of all things is near. Therefore, be clear-minded and self-controlled, so that you can pray. Above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. And that's 1 Peter 4:7-9. And see, there it is. See that? And, here's the next one. I'll just read you my 3 scriptures that I've got here right now. For God speaks again and again, though people do not recognize it. He speaks in dreams and visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on people as they lie in their beds. He whispers in their ears and terrifies them with warnings. He makes them turn from doing wrong. He keeps them from pride. He protects them from the grave, from crossing over the river of death. And that's Job 33:14-18. And then my last card is Jeremiah 17:7. But blessed are those who trust in the Lord and have made the Lord their hope and confidence. So I take these, and I will today, I'll pull the next one out and I'll look at it. A soothing tongue is a tree of life, but perversion in it crushes the spirit. Proverbs 15:4. Okay, and then I just rotate them to the back. But sometimes there are different ones that feel just kind of significant for the, what's going on in my life at the time. And I keep them right on top, okay, just like this. I've been doing this for more than 20 years. This box, these cards, well, I add to them all the time. But so you see how it lays on top like this. And then, and this is the part I'm not sure you're going to be able to see, when the box is closed, it's a transparent top. Maybe you can faintly tell, but in person, I can read that scripture card. Well, not as good as I used to be able to, because it is getting a little scratched up. But that card will show through the top, okay? So, at this time in my life, when this all happened, and I got robbed and, and all of that, this sat on a side table next to my couch in the living room. And because I had a big overstuffed couch that was just so comfy to curl up on, and that I had my Bible and my treasure box and my prayer journal and everything right there on that end table, because that's where I used to go have my quiet time with the Lord, especially when I was living alone. I could be anywhere in the house that was comfortable. That's what I did, get my cup of coffee, and I did that. So this box was sitting on that table. Now, I was cleaning things, so I had picked up the box to dust it off and wipe it down, and I could see my scripture card in there, okay? And I set it down, and I dusted off the other little items that I had that needed to be dusted off. Then I picked these items up and began to move them so I could wipe down the whole table. And when I picked this box back up, just that, I mean, I'd set it down, wiped off a few things, picked it back up, and I could see a crisp, brand new $100 bill folded up on top, laying in there. And I'm like, what? So I opened up my box, and sure enough, okay, so there was $100. And I needed to be able to get some groceries and some gas, and I think I had a bill that I had due or something. But anyway, the $100 took care of it. And so that night, you know, I mean, I just started laughing and crying and like, what in the world? Trying to come up with an explanation how that happened. And there's no explanation other than God put the money in my treasure box. And so when everybody came that night, I told them, you know, what had happened. And I had that $100 bill in my treasure box, and I showed them. I'm like, this is what happened to you guys. And so then they're laughing and crying and like, isn't God amazing? You know, he can do absolutely anything out of absolutely nothing. You know, he's God. He's the only one that can do that. So it was exciting. And then I had said, you know, I've got some other things coming due before I, you know, get my next paycheck. So or get my next money. I had my own business, but my business, I was a Christian counselor, but my business was failing because, there were some people that had said some things, one person in particular, to try to destroy my business because they didn't like me and they wanted me to fail. And so when you're a Christian counselor going through a divorce, and I was upfront with all my clients. They all knew. I didn't go into the details why or anything, but I let them know, you know, full disclosure, I'm going through a divorce now. And, there were most of my clients. I mean, there were some times when I maybe only made $50 for the week. So it was a hard time. And the money that I had put back to help take care of me was all gone because that had been robbed. And so, you know, but like I said, you know, one of the few times in my life when I didn't panic or worry, I got weird hair sticking out. Okay, where I didn't panic, I didn't worry, but I just trusted God, and God did not fail me. But anyway, I knew I had, you know, like the electric bill coming up. And so, you know, everybody in the group was like, you know, I wonder if God's going to do something. Well, God did. I started finding money in just odd places in my house, and it was these crisp, brand new $100 bills, and nobody else was in the house. So, you know, the people from my prayer group, one of them, my adopted sister who gave me this mug, I remember she called and said, well, did the money show up? And, you know, and I'm like, yep, it sure did. And, you know, and I told her and stuff. So anyway, my mom and dad had come over, and, it was the next week we were having Bible study. And my mom and dad, because they used to come to the Bible study, we were sitting around the kitchen table, and so my sister was like going, you need to tell everybody how God provided. I'm like, oh, hey, trust me, I want to. So I'm telling them just these random places that I was finding money. And it would be like I was right there. There was no money. I turned around, did something, turned back, and there was the money laying there. And nobody was in the house. So there was nobody to put it there. And I don't think my little dogs had crisp, brand new $100 bills that they were running around and laying out. And so then, bless my dad's heart, my dad had the beginnings of Alzheimer's back then, and so he already was becoming kind of childlike in some things. But my dad was a really awesome man and a lot of fun, loved the Lord more than anything. And anyway, so as we're having Bible study, my dad's like, oh, I need to run to the bathroom, you know, for a minute. And so he goes in to the bathroom, and then he comes out, and he's like, Angie, I think, the towel in there needs to be changed. You probably should go check it. And I go, okay, and he goes, no, I think you need to do it now. So I go in and I'm like looking at this towel, what's wrong? And he goes, well, take it down. And so when I took it down, like a $20 bill fell out of it. And then he's like going, and I think that there's something wrong with that cabinet door. You should open it. And there's like a $5 bill or whatever. So my dad, and I knew it was him, he had gone into the bathroom and was hiding money around the bathroom because he just thought this was great and he wanted to be a part of it. And he's like, you don't know it's me. You know how a little kid will tell on themselves and they don't know how you know? Well, that's the way my dad was at this point. And so he was, it just was so obvious. But I was like, thank you, Daddy, but I don't want you to have to, to do this for me. The Lord's taking care of me. And anyhow, my cute little daddy, I miss him. And my mom was like, yeah, he was going around asking me, do you have a 5? Do you have a, 20? Do you have a 10? Do you have some ones? She goes, so I knew he was probably going to be hiding money around your house today. And so then she's like, how much money did you hide? And he's like, I didn't hide any money. She goes, well, I hope you find it all, And so anyway, there is a difference between when people do something and when God does it. Because with people, you can usually trace it back and come with an explanation. But when you're looking at something and there's nothing there, you look over here, and then when you look back, there is something there. Yeah, and the lid's closed and nobody's there. I mean, there's just, on every level, that's impossible. But yet God did that for me. And so Marvin and I were talking about that this morning, and then we started remembering within the first 2 or 3 years that we were married, and back when I still wanted to really please him, do things that would make him happy. That's a joke. I still want to. I love my husband very much. He is an amazing husband, and I am so grateful that the Lord brought us into each other's lives and that we have each other. So it has been definitely healing for me. But anyhow, when we first were married, Marvin worked in farming, and he had to be up and out. I mean, often during harvest, he worked 7 days a week. There was no break, and he maybe got 4 or 5 hours sleep every night because they worked into the fields late and back out early, and there just wasn't time. I mean, he just would come home, get a bite to eat, go to sleep, get up, get a bite to eat, go to work, and and that was his life. And so actually, the place that he worked for, they shut down and started doing something else, and so his job came to an end back in November of 2018. And and I remember we're at first it's like, what are we going to do? Because we didn't know that was coming. We had no warning, and it just suddenly, he goes to work and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, you don't have a job anymore. And, told all the guys, and you can pick up your last check on Thursday, Friday, whatever it was. And so, we were concerned, but we knew God would take care of us, and God did. And it turned out to be, what we thought was devastating turned out to be a real blessing for us. And how God does that too. He takes devastation and turns it into blessings all the time. But anyway, in the first few years we were married, I got up with Marvin, sometimes 3, 4 o'clock in the morning is when we'd be getting up. And I would make him oatmeal while he took a shower and got dressed and, and tried to wake himself up. And I would pack him his lunch and, get everything ready and get him out the door. And he usually was out before 5. And then when the weather and stuff and news would come on at 5, I'd, be watching that and gathering information, because he'd be calling, wanting to know, okay, what did it say, and that's just how it was. Well, when I would make his oatmeal, Marvin likes to have some cinnamon in his oatmeal, a little touch of vanilla, a little touch of cinnamon. And so when I went to my spice cabinet to get the cinnamon, the bottle was empty. I had run out, and money was a little on the tight side at times for us. And so it wasn't like you just were always, we were on a budget, okay? And even then, the store wasn't even open, so I couldn't run up and get some. And even if I could, I wouldn't have been back in time to have everything ready to go for him. And so here I am, no cinnamon for my husband. Now I'd be like, not a big deal. You'll be fine. But back then, I was his new bride, and I wanted, everything to be perfect. And so I was like, Lord, after I took that cinnamon bottle out and it was empty and I couldn't get anything out of it, and I mean, it was done. I said, Lord, I know it's not super important, but it is something that my husband, that he enjoys. And I would really like to be able to put the cinnamon in his oatmeal. And I know that I can walk up to the spice cabinet and open the door, and you could have a brand new bottle of cinnamon sitting right there, even though I just opened it a minute ago and I know there isn't. That's, and I'm like, well, maybe, let me check, and I opened it and went through, yeah, no, there's no more cinnamon up there. And, I said, and so I closed the door. I go, now I can open this door again because you're God. And there can be a bottle of cinnamon sitting there, so I can put it on my husband's oatmeal. I go, just like this, I can just reach up here and I could open the cabinet. And as I said that, I opened the cabinet door. And there, front and center, and I'd said, you could have it sitting front and center. And there it was, front and center, this brand new, not unopened bottle of cinnamon. Not the store brand like we usually bought, we got the cheapest whatever. But really expensive cinnamon that we couldn't afford. I mean, that was not in the budget. And this is what the rich people get, when they go to the grocery store. And I'm like, oh, but not only that, and this particular brand of cinnamon, because, well, there was a time when I did buy it, when I did have money, and I would buy the expensive stuff. And I knew that this cinnamon comes with a black lid and gold lettering on it. But this particular bottle of cinnamon had a red lid with the gold lettering. I have never, ever seen the cinnamon sold with a red lid, ever. It's always a black or dark brown, whatever, with gold lettering on it. That's for my entire life. That's the way that cinnamon looks. But this cinnamon sitting there had a red lid with gold lettering, and it wasn't there a moment before. So I started laughing. I started crying. I had to tell Marvin. I put the cinnamon on his oatmeal. I mean, God gave you cinnamon this morning. And I remember him coming out of the bedroom and to come get his oatmeal. I'm like, God is feeding you this morning. You are eating blessed cinnamon, miraculous cinnamon. I don't even know what it's gonna do to you. I was just so excited. And so, we had that. Marvin was laughing. He goes, yeah, I remember. Well, then there was another one where I had made him pancakes or waffles, something like that. And he has this particular syrup that he really likes. He doesn't like any other syrup. It's this one syrup. And so when I went to get the bottle out of the cupboard with the syrup, there wasn't hardly anything in it. Not enough to put on his pancake or waffle, whichever one, or French toast. It was one of those three things. And so I was like, well, you know how you did for the cinnamon. Because there was some syrup in the cupboard, but it was this really icky syrup that when he had some of the kids had come home to live with him for a while, and so it was stuff they had left. It had been there for a few years. It was nasty. I just hadn't thrown it out. I don't know why. Well, because I don't think I'd really felt like this was my home yet that I could. But anyway, that's all there was in there. And I'm like, oh, I can't put that on his food. That's not going to be good. It's nasty. And I had tasted again, and it was just awful. It was like a sugar-free version, too. And it just, it was awful, awful, awful. So, so I closed the cupboard, I think that's how it was. I can't remember. I was trying to remember, and Marvin was too, if it was in the cupboard or if it was in the fridge or on the counter. But anyway, I told the Lord, I know you have proved yourself to me so many times, and it's not like this is a life and death thing or anything. It's just to bless my husband. But it would bless me if you would bless him with his syrup today. And anyway, and then there was the syrup, wherever it was, whether I opened the cabinet back up or I opened the fridge or wherever, but whatever I opened, there was the syrup, a brand new bottle. Now, it had a red seal on it, and because it was unopened, and the syrup does, I do believe it does come with a red seal. But when you take the red seal off, it's a white lid. This had a gold lid. And I have never found that syrup in the store with a gold lid. Not before or not after. So, there it was. And again, I'm like, God provided your syrup this morning. And that bottle lasted us a long, long time. So, when we were talking about all this, that some things, sometimes it is important, like when you get robbed and you've got no money to pay your bills. That's kind of an important thing. And then there's some things that aren't that important. They're just a blessing, like the cinnamon and the syrup. He could have lived without them. But that God loves us so much, no matter what. And that he really can do these things for us. And, and Marvin was laughing. He goes, I've heard people before say that God doesn't do miracles anymore. And we both started laughing, because if that's true, then we're both delusional. Because we experienced the miraculous. We both have experienced the miraculous hand of God so many times in our lives. And still to this day, we experience that from him. But this is just kind of as we were reminiscing today, it's been a reminder to me how much God loves us. And I just wanted to share that with you this morning and encourage you, because he doesn't love me more than he loves you. He doesn't love Marvin more than he loves you. He loves us all. He loves us all the same. And we all matter to him. And I think that sometimes the thing that gets in our way is that we just don't believe he'll do it, or we don't even bother to ask. But there's something about, I think about when my kids were little, to have a child that loves you and asks you for something or about something, and what a delight it is to be able to tell them what it is that they want to know, or to provide for them what it is that they want. I remember when my girls were little, this one Christmas, and scooters were the big thing. Everybody was getting these scooters, and those two girls wanted scooters so bad. And we kept telling them, I don't know that we can get them, and then, it was like, most of the stores were sold out. You couldn't even get them, and kind of like with Cabbage Patch dolls and the whole thing that went with that. It was one of those things where we lived that, and we're like, we don't even know if we can find them and everything. Well, we did find scooters, and we got them each one in their favorite color, and we had them hid away. And so on Christmas morning, they opened their gifts, and there were no scooters, and they're like, but that's okay. And then we said, why don't you go out to the garage? And then when they went out to the garage, there were their scooters with big bows on them, and just seeing. Now, that was not life and death. It was not a necessity. But what a joy just to be able to give our girls what they really desired. And if we feel that way about our own children, how much more does God feel that way about us? It doesn't mean we always get what we want, because there are times when I've asked God. I remember there was this one guy that I really, really liked, and I kept asking God to make him like me too, and and he just didn't. Well, the years go by, and you see how somebody turned out and what they did with their life and all, and it's like, thank you for not answering. that prayer. Oh, that's like that song that the guy, thank God for unanswered prayers. But it's true, there's sometimes we ask God for something, we think we really want it, and God knows better. And I have, as I've, matured, have been able to come to a point where I can say, Lord, I think I would really like you to answer this prayer in this way, but I know you know things I don't. You know what's best for me. And that's what I really want, not my will over yours. And there's wisdom in that because God chooses wisely. When it came down to after my divorce, because I hadn't been dating in over 36 years since I'd been out on the market, and I was looking in the church, and what I was finding was it wasn't a good situation, and I began to realize that the men, even within the church, I would not be in a better situation. I'd be just in the same situation I'd come out of, which was not good, and I was not willing to be in that anymore. So I would either end up back in that or maybe even worse. And so I had told the Lord, unless you bring a man to me, set him down in front of me and say, here, this one, marry him, I'm done. I'm not looking. I'm not interested. I don't want it because I don't trust myself to choose wisely. And I just don't see any quality options out there. So, and I remember, and I'd go, even though I know I'm going to be so lonely, but it'll just be you and me. And I wouldn't have been lonely. God would have worked that out for me too, because how can you be lonely when God's with you? It's just different. But anyway, it was after that, when the time was just right, that the Lord introduced Marvin and I to each other. Even though we lived 3,000 miles apart, we had grandchildren in common, and it was one of those grandchildren that actually introduced us over the phone. And so we began to talk, and we have talked every day since all those years ago. And we built a great relationship, and the greatest thing we had in common was our love for the Lord. And it's funny because Marvin had said the same thing to the Lord. He was lonely, he was looking for a wife, and what he was finding was not what he was really looking for. And so he had told the Lord the same thing. Unless you bring somebody to me, I'll just be alone. And so neither one of us are alone. We had to wait till the time was right. Then God introduced us to each other, and then we had to, wait. After we got engaged, I asked Marvin if we could wait a year to get married, even though we were 3,000 miles apart, and we were still talking on the phone every day. And he flew out there to get engaged, and I flew back here a couple times to visit and get to know where my new home was going to be. But I had felt that if we gave it at least a year, we would go through all the anniversaries of whatever, and and all the things we got to deal with, and it would be a good amount of time so we would be sure that we really were hearing from God and not convincing ourselves that we were. And so so we were engaged for a year, and then we were married, and there was no hesitation, no fear. I mean, it was a delight to walk down the aisle to that man. Yes, well, he'd tell you I didn't walk down the aisle. I ran, dragging my dad behind me with his feet flapping in the wind. That is about right. I was so ready to be married to Marvin and so delighted. And one of my friends used to tell me that I lit up like a Christmas tree every time Marvin came around, and she was right, I did. But it wasn't like when I was young. It wasn't like, infatuation or a bunch of lust or anything like that. This man was my friend, my best friend by the time we got married, and the foundation of our relationship was the Lord Jesus Christ. And he's more the foundation now than he was then. Definitely. But that was our common ground. That was the deal breaker, is that we both insisted that the other one loved Jesus more than they loved us. and then we love each other second only to God. So anyway, it was a beautiful thing, and God did provide that. He did set him in front of me and say, here, this one, marry him. And so I knew I was not making a poor choice, because it wasn't me out there trying to make a choice. So just because we don't always get what we want, and and sometimes we treat God like he's supposed to be our magic genie in a lamp and grant us all our wishes, and it's not like that. So I think that there are some things that we have to consider, that God will answer the prayer the way he wants to, how he wants to, and that if I'm wanting something that's not a good choice for me, then I want him to say no. And but even when sometimes he asks you to do something that maybe you didn't really want to do and you didn't think you'd be doing, but if it's what God wants, then you're not going to go wrong. So I do believe, because there's been times when I've been, in my immature days, where I wanted him to answer every prayer I put out there the way I wanted it to be answered, and I had to grow up to find out that sometimes it's good for God to say no, and that his will is way more important than mine, and I have the right to surrender my will to him, and I try to do that more and more. So anyway, this has gone long. I've been feeling better. For those of you that have been praying for me, please keep praying. I've actually had about 3, maybe 4 really, I'm not perfect, but the really serious things that have been going wrong have not even been an issue. So I praise God for that. It's just, the little aches and pains that I, deal with all the time anyway, but the serious things that have been a little more of a concern have not been rearing their ugly head for several days now. And I don't know, it may just be, again, and I know some people don't like it when I talk like this, it may just be a little break. It may be a complete healing. I don't sense that there's a complete healing there. And, I have to go to Paul and his thorn in the flesh, and I know that sometimes God will leave a thorn because it keeps us humble and dependent on him. It serves a purpose for him. And we have to remember, because when Paul kept saying, take this away from me, and God said, my grace is sufficient for you, that it's in our weakness that his strength is made known. So it's that surrender of my will to his, that whatever he's asking of me, it'll be fine. And if I need to go through some hard things, then I'll go through them. If I need to suffer a little, I'll suffer a little. I'm trying to really seek his guidance on what he would have me do or not do. And even when other people don't understand. But again, an important thing for the day we live in, because if we have to please people, we're going to be in trouble. We need to only worry about pleasing God and doing what he wants us to do. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. I don't even know how many of you will have made it to the end. I hope somebody did, because I missed you guys. And I praise God for this little opportunity here to reach out to you. You have a very blessed day. I love you. Remember me in prayer. I'm remembering you in prayer. And we'll see what God has for us, okay? All right, love you. Talk to you later.